Today is a beautiful day, and when you live on a golf course, it means that I should be out playing golf. But I'm here to tell a story, my story. And I hope that by the time we're done, that I have told you how I got here. And that's important to me. I'm satisfied with the life that I've led. And today, my wife, she's out playing bridge, and I can't wait for her to come home, because we usually sit together and we talk. And when we go out with friends, and if some of the friends don't know my story, my wife will roll her eyes when I start rolling into one of the stories I've told many times before. So today, I'm sitting around waiting for her to come home. And if she doesn't come home soon, I'll go out and play golf somewhere. But I'm happy. I'm a happy man. I've got my physical problems. Being a war veteran, playing a lot of golf, played soccer. So where I am today, I'm not pain-free, but I'm a happy man. When I was considering going into the insurance business, I was going to college on the GI Bill, and I was coming to the end of a 4-year program. And my wife's uncle was in the insurance business, and I was considering it. And I asked him, I said, Howard, how was it, how did you enjoy the insurance business? And he says, you're going to meet a lot of dullards in life. He says, there are a lot of people out there, and you'd be amazed where you're going to find them. But he said, it is a good life. And so I started the insurance business as a young kid, right out of the Marine Corps, went to college for 4 years, didn't have any children, newly married. My wife was a school teacher. So her income supported me initially, so that I had time to build the business. Like any entrepreneur, you start out, you make mistakes, you don't have enough money, and you're learning your trade. And usually the company would teach me how to sell insurance. After a while, I knew that they didn't know what they were talking about, and I had to learn the style myself. And I know people appreciated honesty and to be succinct and get out of their house, because most of my sales presentations were at the kitchen table in many of my clients' houses. They didn't come to my office. I came to theirs, and that's how my advertising went. My office is as close as your phone, and a lot of people appreciated that. I'd come to their house at the end of the day or on weekends, and you build you build honesty, a relationship. And I got referrals from people who trusted me. And that's how my business grew. And it is an enjoyable business. When people trust you and listen to your advice, it is, I never wanted to do anything that would take advantage of a client. I would tell them that I shouldn't sell you this, or you shouldn't buy that. The other agents I worked with, I saw some agents that I was embarrassed were in my business, and I tried not to be like them. I started out, a partner that I had was a first sergeant in the Marine Corps that retired, and he taught me how to be an honest businessman. And I've always followed his guidance. He died 10 years after I started in the business, but I think about him every day, even today. And one of the reasons is because he's from New York, and he remembered every joke he was ever told. And I asked him, I said, how do you remember so many jokes, Ed? And he said, you got to tell it. You got to tell a good joke. And every time you tell it, you remember it. And to this day, I remember most of the jokes he used to tell me. And I wait for the opportunity to tell jokes. Well, the problem with people is they're poorly informed, not only about important things in their lives. They don't understand their mortgage. They don't understand retirement. They don't understand taxes. And you would think that people would be involved in their lives. They aren't. You know, it is hard for me to go in and try to talk to a client and say, well, I can save you money and this is how I'm going to do it. That only takes about 10 minutes. But to teach them that I'm giving you a service. And that's what we have to do in life. You know, if we're always selling ourselves to people. When you go to a party and you're speaking to somebody, you know, they're going to be bored if you don't have something interesting to talk about. When I go to a party, I have three things in mind. I'm going to hear a joke, I'm going to hear a recipe because I'm a great cook, and I want to hear somebody's life story. And so when I go to a party, I'm looking to solve those three things. I'm there to learn. A lot of people go to parties and they want to drink and they want to laugh and everything, but you got to think about when you interact with people, you're learning something. You should always be learning something. I would say the happiest memory that I have, that I remember almost daily, is my wedding day. At that time, we dated for a year and a half before our wedding day. I met her, I'd just gotten out of the Marine Corps 6 months before, and I considered myself a tough guy. And here is this sweet girl who didn't let me get away with that. She was sweet, she talked to me, she was funny, she was intelligent, and I felt that I was so lucky because I've dated a lot of girls, but when she came along, she was unique. She was for me. So when I met her and I was introduced to Ginger, and her real name is Virginia Lee Fowler. She was born and raised in Virginia, or she was born in Maryland, but she was raised in Virginia. She was a good Southern girl. And when I was dating her, she was just a pleasure to be with. I consider myself lucky. On my wedding day, no one ever thinks about what this particular day is going to be like. It's just another event. Well, in the church that we get married in, there were 2 aisles, and everyone sat down the middle. So when she walked down the aisle, I could just see the top of her father's head and a little bit of her veil. And they were playing the music. And when she came down to the end and turned and I made eye contact with her, I felt such a rush of adrenaline. I felt the entire Holy Ghost. I felt every spirit in the world wanted to enjoy that experience. I felt full of emotion. And when I couldn't believe my luck that Ginger wanted to marry me. My oldest son is RJ. He's my firstborn. We were married for 3 years before my wife and I decided to start our family. We call him RJ, Richard Jason, because with Richard, a lot of people would say, well, that's Richard Jr., but we call him RJ. RJ was where I learned to be a father. Now, I have always knew I was going to be a father at one time, and so I think I trained for it. I think every person that ever decides to get married and have a family, as early as you know you're going to do that, you're training to do that. And so I had to learn with RJ, and I loved being his dad. But sometimes he's stubborn, and to this day he's stubborn. And you know, he won't let me tell the same stories to him. He will catch me and say, Dad, I've heard that. Dad, I'm not interested in hearing that again. But he and I, we get along. We're at opposite politically. He's more of a take care of himself kind of guy. I love him, And he's smart, very smart. And I've got at one time when we were raising him, we played a lot of Jeopardy while watching television. And I told him if he could beat me in Jeopardy, I would buy him something. Well, there came a day that he wanted a pair of tennis shoes, expensive tennis shoes. And he'd already seen the show and I hadn't. And he whipped me so bad. And I knew he had me. So he's a smart kid. And when he started at Virginia Tech, he said it was an edge of vacation. He was way too smart for college because he breezed right through. And when it came time for him to go to law school, had no problems with it. And so yeah, I'm very proud of him. And I see him, I take him to lunch, and we have our discussions, but we very seldom agree on anything. Robbie, my second son, he is the computer engineer. When we bought computers as soon as they came out. As a matter of fact, we were probably one of the first people that ever had a home computer on Wi-Fi. They loved it. He grew to it. Anytime I would buy a game for him, all his buddies would come over and they'd huddle around that computer screen and they'd play it. And as each one failed, the next one steps in and they'd play it until the end of the day they had beaten the game. And to this day, he still plays games. But when he comes over, he loves to come over. We have detailed discussions. He makes me think. I try to make him think. And he's funny. But I remember once when we were Boy Scouts and I was hiking him and the troop uphill, he was really afraid that I was going to fall over dead. It was a steep climb and I had to keep stopping. And I said, son, just go on. I'll get up there eventually. He would not leave me. And I've always remembered that. Well, Robbie has 4 children. 2 are in college now, and 2 are what we call the littles. And I have 8 grandchildren, 4 older and 4 younger. We call them the littles. Robbie has 4. And he comes over here as refuge. And I love seeing him. We sit here and we talk about everything. Yeah, because he's a techie, I talk to him a lot about AI and how serious it is. Him being in that field, he scares me a little bit. He and Stephen Hawking's both worried about AI. So I listen to him. But I also have my own ideas. But he's a good kid and very smart. Megan came into this world a little bit different than the boys. Because she was going to be our last child, we knew it. I convinced my wife she should have her natural. And my wife, she usually lets me talk her into things. But when she was in labor, that's when she regretted it. But she was in labor a long time, and they had her in a labor room. They didn't have her in a birthing room. And as a consequence, she had a special bed and everything. And of course, my wife never cusses to me. She never yells at me. She was never mad at me. But she regretted letting me talk her into going natural. So she asked the nurses how far she dilated. And they said, not very much, not very much. And so she was getting a little angry. So she finally said, I need an epidural. This is just too much. So when the epidural doctor came in, he gave her, inserted the needle. And when he did, it caused her to crown. There was no doctor in there other than the anesthesiologist. The nurse wasn't in there. I delivered my daughter. By the time the nurses came in, the doctor came in, my daughter was born. I was the first one to hold my daughter. So how that went through our lives, that when she got married and I stood up to toast my daughter, I turned to my son-in-law, I said, I was the first one to hold her and I took care of her. Now it's your turn. I know you're not going to let me down. And they're celebrating their 13th anniversary this week. and I love them both. You know, she has 2 children, and she's a great mom, but she is too much like me. She is stubborn, but when I've got them all together, there's nothing better than having all my children, all my grandchildren in this house, and they're here often. They're going to be here for Memorial Day coming up. They're here for Christmas. They're here for Thanksgiving. It's a great experience, and they all live within 30 minutes of me. So I see them a lot. So I have to behave myself. You know, I can't run around and I don't drink a lot, but I do drink a lot of wine. And sometimes they come over and they say, "Are you drinking wine again, Dad?" I said, "Well, I'm tasting it. I'm tasting it." But it's funny. You know, they make sure that I behave myself. But you know, my wife and I, we never argue about anything, but we do get, every now and then we get snippy. And when my wife calls my daughter will immediately call me and she'll chew me out. "Don't you make my mom sad. You go over there and you tell her you're sorry." And she's right. Most of the time, she's absolutely right. There are times that my wife and I, we get a little tense before we went to work back in the day, and I'd think about, I'm going to get home and I'm going to tell her, I'm going to win this argument. And I'd come in the house ready for an argument, and she would say, "Hi, honey, how was your day?" And everything at this place, it was good, honey. How you? She had me. Ginger has always had me wrapped around a little finger. And as I said, I love her. I love my children. I love my life. That's why I'm making this tape today. I am so pleased that at this stage of my life that I've had the experience of that I've had. And it didn't start out very strong. You know, it was a rough start. And it didn't really start going until I met Ginger. And I'm so grateful for that. Our 50th wedding anniversary was in RJ's backyard. It was just family. And they made a film of our pictures and our videos. I have a lot of videos. I had a video camera most of their lives when they were growing up. So they would take some of those videos, and there was an hour-long presentation in RJ's backyard, and I was just amazed. And they put our story together in such a way that I was so proud of them. And I'm glad that my family loves us the way they do. It's just the warmest feeling having my family around with me. And their pictures are all over the house. When I talk about my early life, my parents married right after World War II, and they were it was almost a war wedding. They shouldn't have married. They were not suited for each other. Their marriage only lasted 15 years, and it was tumultuous. And we kids, there was 5 of us, and we lived through it. And I can say that I have learned how to live my life, not from my parents, but from watching black and white TV in the 50s, when they had a lot of family shows. Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver, Ozzie and Harriet, Danny Thomas. All these shows were family shows. They were half-hour shows. They'd have a problem, they'd figure it out, and at the end, they're all happy and getting along. In my family, it was never like that. And so I would get away by playing football, playing baseball, being in the Boy Scouts. I tried to get away from a lot of the drama in my family. And then one night when I was 17, my mother and father had had a big spat. And my mother said, that's it. And my father has done some terrible things. And so when she said, that's it, I took it upon myself to be the gatekeeper. I confronted my father. He left that night, and we never saw him. The family never saw him again. I did see him, but the family did not. And I felt guilty about that. And when I went into the Marine Corps, I sent all my money home. And at the time, The family lived in Norfolk, Virginia. My mother, she's from Northern California outside of San Francisco, where all of her family is. And so I sent all the money that I made in the Marine Corps home so she could relocate her, my brothers, my sister, out back to California. So now I had a choice. I could go back to Norfolk, Virginia when I got out of the Marine Corps, or I could go out to California. I didn't really feel comfortable in California, but I didn't know any place else to go. But I did know that if I went back to California, I would never see my father again. So I made an effort to see my father and apologize to him for the confrontation we had. And he, at the time, was the editor of a race car magazine, NASCAR, and he was going to national NASCAR events, and he would stop by the base in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and take me to a race. And after a couple of races, he said, if you stay on the East Coast, I'll help you go to college. That sounded pretty good to me. So I did. Then realized soon after, he and I didn't get along either. So I relocated with a friend that I had in college, and the friend said, I want to introduce you to a high school friend of mine. And Ginger was home on spring break in her junior year in college, and I met her, and within 2 or 3 dates, I loved her. And we have never been separated since that time. So it is that, I don't know, I hate to call it, but it's a cascading events that would, one after the other led me to Ginger. I spent 2 tours in Vietnam, and that was tough, but I was institutionalized by war. I was getting ready to serve my 3rd tour when the Marine Corps fought its biggest battle, its Battle of Hue, during Tet Offensive 1968. And it was the result of that I decided I'd been here too long. And
And by the way, who do we have? Who just walked in?
Oh, Ginger just walked in. Hey, baby.
Hi.
Well, I think we ought to hit upon some of the activities that I was involved with at the same time I was raising the family. I mean, this Lions Club thing, that was one of the greatest group of guys, because it's an unusual group of people who join a civic club for the betterment of their community. And these guys would not hesitate. If you needed them, they would come to your assistance. We did things, we ran bingos, we were out at the fairgrounds running the food booth. We had funny jokes. We had a guy who had just joined our club, and we had a tough time lighting the water heater behind the place that we were cooking food. We need that water heater. And he said, I know how to do that. I know how to do that. So he goes back there, and after a few minutes, we hear, boof. He comes out, his eyebrows are all singed, his hair is a little burnt. We said, we thought you knew how to do that. And he said, yeah, that's what happened the last time I tried to do it. So we laughed about that for years. I mean, he didn't last in the club very long, but we had guys that we'd go to conventions with the Lions Club, and we wore a red derby hat so that everybody at the convention would know that the Park West Lions Club is in the house. And we'd have a hospitality room at the hotels we stayed at, and every night after all the hospitality suites closed, we'd come in there and we'd party. And I would always have raffle tickets because I was always raffling off the television in my room. It was funny. Oh, we had such great times. And it lasted for years and years, and I was the youngest member of the club. And I knew as we moved on that I didn't want to be the last guy to lead. So about 15 years ago, I went member at large, and soon after that, most of the members died or moved away, and the club is just a small shell of what it used to be. And I'm sorry that happened. But there were such great times. And once they knew I cooked, I was their cook. I cooked in the kitchen. We owned a building. We built a building, and we had fundraisers, and I would cook for 300 people 2 or 3 times a year. I did all the state cookouts for the club cookouts. I even ran a small catering company where I used the kitchen of the Lions Club, and I would cook, and I loved to cook. And I remember these guys would come and help me for years. I'd have an attorney in there peeling eggs, and I'd have a doctor in there chopping up the salad, and we'd just laugh and joke the whole time. But they're all gone now, and I think about that often. I remember in my professional association, a lot of great guys in there. I did a lot of work with them. I eventually became the president. I became president of the Lions Club. I became president of the professional association. I continued to work on the state organization. I became the president of that. I owned a building, a commercial building, and I became the president of the condo association for 30 years. I was a Boy Scout leader for 8 years. I was a soccer coach, a commissioner, a player. When my boys started, both my oldest son RJ and Robbie both went to Virginia Tech, and they weren't at the same time. Each one was spaced out just right, 4 years apart. But we started going to the Virginia Tech football games, and for 20 years we had season tickets all through the great years. Coach Beamer had the longest record of bowl games of any active coach. And almost every season we went to the bowl games. It comes down to, what do you owe your community? What do you owe your family? I think when you take on the responsibility of being a parent, it's an important responsibility. I've seen so many families where the children fall away from the family. And I believe that my children are close to us because they want to be here. They love us and we love them. I'll do anything for my family. And it all comes from the people in the Lions Club. They did the same thing for their families. They were just a special breed of people. And in the professional association, they were all good insurance agents. And so I learned from them. My brother-in-law was a big real estate guy, and he sent me a lot of clients. And so I learned from him. So you have to be open-minded. To sit on your butt and watch television all day or play games all day, you're depriving yourself of the opportunity to learn. I've always told my grandchildren, reading is learning. You never stop. And I do have a slight problem with this dyslexia and a little bit of a problem with attention deficit. But it wasn't until the 5th grade that the 5th grade class, all the classes of 5th grade, went in Norfolk, would spend the day going to Jamestown and Yorktown, and it only cost a few dollars to go. Well, my family didn't have the few dollars, so I had to sit in a classroom all that day, and for the first time in my life, I read a book from cover to cover. That started a lifetime love of reading. I read all the time, and I can't get my children to do that, but I always encourage them. Read the book I just finished. Read any book. Let's talk about a book. Reading is learning, and don't ever stop. That you have got to set a pattern for your life as early as you can. I think I've always felt confident in my life. From the earliest age, I knew things would work out for me. And I plotted a course, but I'll tell you something that not many people know, is that when I was stationed in Japan after my 2 tours in Vietnam, and I didn't know when I was about to get out of the Marine Corps what I was going to do. I wasn't sure whether I was going to go to college. I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know what I was going to do for a living. So I asked God. I said, what do you think I should be doing in 10 years? And I can't say for sure, but I felt I had a vision. And I could see a woman, a little poodle dog, she's holding a girl, 2 boys in front of a house with pillars. 10 years later, I had that. That was my life. And I knew in Japan, before I even met Ginger, that she was coming. I felt destined to be in the life that I am. The goal I had is to go to college, be a white-collar worker, work hard, provide for your family, be the father knows best character in that TV show. Support your family. Most of us go through life thinking, well, my life I'm not going to really embark on it until all the lights are green and the road is always straight and easy to see. Life is not like that. Life is full of glitches. And what we learn from going to school and going to college and reading books, we learn to problem solve. The faster and the easier it is for you to solve problems, the happier you'll be, because everybody has problems. This trip that Ginger and I just got back from, well, we went to Australia and New Zealand and Tahiti and Hawaii. We had glitches all through it, and I thought I had planned it perfectly. And we had glitches from, I came down with an infection. I had to go to the doctor, and they have nationalized health care there. It was kind of iffy there, but I got through it. But we had so many things planned, we had to do thing one after the other. We can't fly 25 hours away and sit around and whine about a problem. You got to be involved in life. You got to solve the problems. You got to get engaged in life, because you and your wife, you're partners in a business, and it's the family business. The regret I have is when I was coming back from Japan. I'd been overseas for 3 years, and I was able to stop at my mother's place outside of San Francisco. My younger brother, Danny, was 17, and she was having problems with him. And she asked if I would take him, and not at that particular time, but when I went back east and serving out my last 6 months in the Marine Corps, and I contacted my father, I didn't really tell her that I was planning to stay on the East Coast until I got out of the Marine Corps. I flew back to California, and I told her, I'm not coming home. I'm going to stay on the East Coast. She told me my younger brother was getting into trouble, and that could I take him back east with me. I thought about it, called my father. I said, I'm going to bring my little brother. And he fought it, but I said, I'm going to do this. And so I agreed to do it. And the last day I was there, she brought him over and she told me, I can't do it. I can't lose another son. And she didn't let me take him with me. My brother had a lifetime of problems. He was on drugs, alcohol. He felt the world was against him. He got fired from almost every job he ever had. He was a teamster. He eventually earned enough money to retire on, but he was just a train wreck. Never had any real relationships, never got married, lived in a little camper trailer, and he just died about a month ago. And I feel the regret. What would have happened had I was able to bring him back? And I felt that if I had, I wouldn't have met Ginger, because I wouldn't have been in a position to do that. And I'm just thinking, did God do that to me to say that I can't? Danny is his own man. He's got to find his own way. You don't have to feel regret that you didn't save him. I tried with my other little brother, Brian. I sent money out there to put him through rehab, and no matter what we did, could ever save him. My other little brother, Brian, he's got MS, and he's never had any children. My oldest brother, he's got one son. His wife just died. My sister, she was married for 20 years, and she and her husband got a divorce, and her 3 children hate her. So I look at my family out there in California. I said, what a train wreck. And then look at the life that I was able to have. What's the difference? Why me and not them? What could they have done and gotten out of this thing? I don't know. I think you've got a plan. You've got to have some kind of an idea. I remember I listened to a lot of tapes when I was in my business because it's kind of a negative business. We insure people against disaster. And a lot of people say no. And a lot of people don't want to spend money on things they should, especially life insurance. But I remember I listened to tapes, and Earl Nightingale would say in his tape, you will become what you think about. Napoleon Hill in his tape, Think and Grow Rich, what the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. I believed in those things. At a convention in Wintergreen down in Charlotte, I was the handler for a speaker that we had come in. And his name was Mark Victor Hansen. And he told me about a project that he was working on that turned into Chicken Soup for the Soul. A very popular book series. He believed in, and his mentor was Buckminster Fuller. They believed in the blue ethers and a benevolent spirit that watches everything. And he believed, and he told me story after story, if you just believe and you ask for help, you usually get it. And I've done that ever since. I always send my prayers up to the blue ethers. I don't believe in any particular religion. I'm a spiritualist. And I believe that if you believe that life is supposed to be peace and harmony, wireless is probably my son. It's probably RJ. It's about the time he would be calling. He'll call his mom on her phone. So Mark Victor Hansen talked to me and talked to my wife. Ginger and I were there together. And the thing I remember about Mark, I'd have him for dinner at a restaurant, and there'd be other people around us at tables, and these are all insurance agents, people that I knew. And he'd be talking to me, and then he'd pause and he'd listen to somebody's conversation. He says, excuse me for a minute, I think this is interesting. He will get out of his chair, he'll walk over, pull another chair up, and sit down with 3 or 4 people. He was hearing their comment, and he would plunge right in. He was that kind of guy. And of course, I knew all those guys. I said, they're not going to appreciate this guy. But he would win them over so quickly because he had this spirit about it. And the stories he would tell me. And I have his tapes. I haven't listened to any for a long time, but I believed in what he said. I believe that there is a benevolent spirit that wants us to be happy. But it's up to us. We have to follow the path. You know, sometimes something comes your way that you shouldn't be going. You know it's not right. And you shouldn't go that way. You know when something is not good for you, you should listen. You should ask for help. I believe that. I believe I'm living a life today because God loves me and He loves the life that I've had. And I can't wait to see all my family, especially when my father died, he had a second family and he treated them as poorly as he did his first. And he died alone. I went down and picked up his ashes, and I brought him up here because he was a veteran. I buried him at Quantico. And every time I go out to see him, I look at all the tombstones because you're allowed to put something on the tombstone. And one would say great father, the other one said great husband, and all of that. And I'd sit down and look, and I'd say, are you paying attention? Are you getting to know these people? Do you regret what you did? Because he was a Christian Scientist because his mother told him. He was never, I don't think he ever appreciated anything in life. It was always about him, and he always, in one of his texts that he sent me, he said, I don't know why I always get it wrong. And it's just too bad. Life is tough, but you've got to be positive. You got to ask for help. So I'm spiritual, and I've always believed. And I was raised a Catholic, but I wasn't raised a Catholic. My mother would shoo us to the Catholic Church. He would never go. And a little bit of that took, a little bit. But I've always had a problem with religion. I don't think it lives up to what it's supposed to be. My children are all believe, they're good people. They go to church. But I know that there is more to this than what we're seeing. And I think people should pay attention. I don't know what the future has. With this AI coming, all this new technology, people who are shying away from having families, getting involved. Well, everybody I know out here has had families. All my good friends are like me. They've had good lives and raised families. But then we all talk about their families, and there's a lot of discord going on. Fortunately, my families, I love them so much, they're following a good path. And I just feel so fortunate about that. And I hope it goes on. If whoever watches this tape one day and they want to know what life is about, life is having a positive mental attitude and loving the people around you and being generous and being honest and working hard. I loved running an insurance agency for 45 years. It was boring. My daughter said, when she worked for me for a little while, she says, boring, Dad. When RJ got out of college, he started working for me. He hated it. He says, this is such a boring job. And I did it for 45 years because I had a mission. I tell Ginger, I said, she's my mission. Every day, I said, I've got to take care of you. You are my mission. And now that we're getting older, she said, your mission's not over. You have to stay with me. And I said, I will do my best. But one day, the mission will be over and you'll be on your own. Or maybe you will be gone and I'll be on my own. But life is a mission. Treat it as such. Get involved. Use what God provided for you. If you're good at something, do it. But work hard. Be honest. Love the people you're with, and just hope for the best. I wish I had more faith in the future, and I don't know if my grandparents back when Elvis Presley and rock and roll started, that they had the same feelings. When I was a kid, there were no such things as riots as we see them today. The world was different than it is today. Today, it's disruptive. I don't know how anybody's going to find their way, but you can. So, tell a joke. Learn jokes. Be a good cook. I love to cook. I'm always looking for recipes, and I'm improving recipes. And find something that you love to do. But first of all, if you're going to have family becomes first. And I think it's one of the things my father never learned. Everything you think of, it's got to be for the family. That's the only thing that lasts is your family. And you're blessed with a family. Take advantage of it. That's what we've tried to do.
You did it.
I'll tell you a joke that Ed told me a long time ago. It was about the man who suspected his wife of being unfaithful. So he came home one day at lunch unexpectedly and burst into the house and found her in bed in a negligee. And he knew there was somebody else in the house, so he ran around until he looked out the window. And he lived on the 10th floor of a 20-story building. And there, hanging from the window, was this naked man. And he started beating on the guy's hands, trying to get him to fall off the ledge. He took off his shoes. He banged on his hands. He took a lamp, banged on his hands. Couldn't get the guy to fall off, so he turned around and he found a refrigerator. He pushed the refrigerator across the room, dropped it out the window, and that's when the guy released and fell. Well, while doing that, he had a heart attack from the effort. And when he gets up to heaven, St. Peter says, there's 3 of you here today, and I can only let one in. So the one who's got the best story will get in. And he asked the first guy, and he says, well, I was on the roof exercising, and I like to exercise in the nude, and a gust of wind came along and blew me off the roof, and I was falling, and I saw this ledge, and I grabbed it. Next thing I know, this man was beating on my hands and trying to get me to fall off, and next thing I knew, he dropped a refrigerator, and I fell to the street. And so St. Peter turned to the second man. He said, why are you here? What happened to you? And he said, well, I was after this guy who was hanging from the window, and I couldn't get him to fall off, so I moved a refrigerator, and the exertion caused my heart to fail, and I died doing that. So he looked at the third guy. He says, what happened to you? And he says, well, I was hiding in this refrigerator. So I've got another one for you. Ed would say that Mike and Pat are in a ditch, and they're working. And the fireman goes by and he said, you boys quit slacking off. You stay working. And he goes away. And they said, why is he the fireman? And we're down here, we're working. So Pat says, well, I'll go ask him. So he finds the foreman. He goes up to him and says, why are you the foreman? We're the workers. The foreman goes over to a fence post, and he puts his hand up on the fence post. He says, hit me hand. So Patrick goes off and swings at the hand. Last minute, the hand moves and he hits the post. So he goes back to talk to Mike. And Mike says, what does he say? He says, hit my hand. That was a good one.